Bigwater Fishing, Captain Ross here. You've probably seen some of our videos on redoing boats and things like that. Well, we're taking on a trailer build. We did one of these a number of years ago, and we're going to do it again here, and I've learned a lot throughout the process of doing a couple buddies. And so here we're going to take you step by step. On this section of the project trailer build, producer dude says I say it different every time, and I probably do. We're talking about lights. Now, there's a lot of things you could probably say are, you know, not necessary. I don't think lights fit into that category. So I learned, you know, since my last trailer, the lights and the LEDs that we used in there have come so far that the ones I have in the other trailer are just archaic compared to this. And they're actually not really that expensive. You can find these things online. I'd recommend kind of doing what I did, where I just bought one and just tried it out, make sure it was of the quality and also the brightness and setup that I wanted. And then I bought quite a few and got a pretty decent deal on those. And when we set these up, I realized that I wanted to get everything out of a wall. The one thing you probably noticed earlier in these sections is that I took all of the wiring that was going to be in the wall and we got it out. You know, that's just a problem, because once that's behind there, it's just a big problem. So I wanted all my wiring to be behind the trim, you know, kind of up at head level in that trailer. And so by doing that, I'm going to put the lights up, and that's going to make sure, again, if I want to do something in the ceiling or I don't have, you know, wires all going all over the place, that we kept that nice and open. And really simply, all we had to do was just lay these out, you know, mark where we wanted them, and I riveted them on. Very simply, using some aluminum rivets there. And one of the little steps that I would kind of recommend to you is I drilled a hole in there with a regular drill bit, but then I put one of those little hole inserts, those little plastic hole inserts, and you can get those at box stores or what have you, and I ran the wires through there. So as this goes up and down the road or whatever, you're not going to have those wires rubbing on that kind of rough cut aluminum in there. And then at the same point, you know, on some places, like in the rear of the trailer there, we used silicone to fill the remainder of that hole where it is actually going outside. So the little areas in there didn't have anything getting in there, bugs and such. So, but once we riveted these things on and we got them down, we just kind of taped the wires out front and put the whole deal back together. And this allowed me to run one kind of master line of some small tinned copper, black and red wire that was kind of bonded together all the way around as like a master wire. And then we use these really neat little T-tab connectors, and they're made with a positive and negative right in it. So that's the big deal. You want to get them with the positive and the negative. And on the top one, kind of like Scotch tabs, the wire runs right through it, and you just crimp it down. It's very simple. A pair of just like lineman's pliers on there is all you need. And we can make a tee-off connection at each point. So this made wiring very simple, a lot less connections. But one thing that I've kind of learned with these is I've had a few that I've had to throw out because they just maybe out of spec a little bit or something, and they just wouldn't stay, you know, closed good. So make sure you crimp that down really good, and then I like to take a little bit of good electrical tape and wrap that around on all of the connections to make sure that's not only going to stay closed, but that we kind of get all those little edges and things kind of sealed up. So having good grounds on LEDs is really, really important. If you don't have a good ground, at some point you're going to have, you know, problems with your lights. So one thing that I didn't do in a previous trailer was I didn't have three-way switches, and I really regretted that because I had to go to the front of the trailer to, you know, turn the lights on and off. So if you can kind of picture this, you know, you got your machines out, you're ready to close up the back door. Well, now you've got to go all the way in the front and all the way back out again. And so I put a on and off switch at both the front and the back that could be turned off either way. So basically it was just an interrupter. So on and off could be even different, but it's just simply an on and off thing. Then the other thing that I did is I'm powering these, of course, with some nice Dakota lithiums. I think I've got 46 amp hours in there because that was enough to run this thing for sure, but it kept down on the weight and size. So I found a little battery bracket that I think was made for racing or something like that. And we mounted those high up on the wall so they're kind of out of the way. And then we made a little strap in there to hold that battery in place as it goes down the road. And we ran that back over to a battery switch. And the reason is I want to be able to do, like I've done in my other trailers, which has been a big deal, is I want to be able to run the power off of my truck. So if the truck's running, when that's hooked up, hey, we can use that power and we don't have to waste our battery power. But by turning that selector switch, now I can run off that Dakota lithium if I choose. So a lot of times that truck's not running, not on, or maybe the trailer's even disconnected, and we can still have that power in the trailer. So that was really a big deal for me to get these interior lights, and then also having that shut-off switch so we can make sure that we don't have a draw, everything's, you know, cut, shut off, and those Dakota lithiums are going to last as long as they possibly can. One of the only other things that, I didn't do in a previous trailer, and I personally learned from my own situation is that, there are areas that you definitely want to have a lot of light. And inside my cabinets and underneath the cabinets are one of those. That's a place we work a lot, and you really need to have a lot of, light in there, especially if you have things leaned up against the wall or whatever that may be blocking some of that light. So I took some extra time to put almost double lights, if you will, in there on the interior. And the other thing that I did throughout that process, and it was really easy because when you tee in there with those tabs that we talked about for making that connection, you could actually just take that light and just hook the positive and negative to like a really small Dakota lithium battery like I use for my flashers. And what I would do is before I would mount those lights, I would kind of see how much output that it had or where it had. And then I actually chose my mounting selection based on that. And so that was a really nice deal because there was a couple places by moving it just a little bit, it really made a difference on how that light was projected. It sounded like a broken record, but I learned so much from my previous trailer and just using these things that, this was kind of the ultimate trailer build, and we wanted to eliminate all of those mistakes. And having outside lights is really important. So we have several different setups. The first one is we have a couple maybe 4-inch in diameter flood round lights that are just huge output. And we teed those into the backup lights on the trailer itself, which was really very simple to do. You trace down that wire, which one it is, basically just use a little kind of T-style connector similar to what we used on the interior lights, and boom, here we are tied into the truck power. So, why do I need that? So if you're somewhere and you're trying to back this thing up and it's pitch black, you're gonna have that extra light, and that's a big deal, especially if you're doing it by yourself. It's gonna let you know what is behind you, especially on a larger trailer like mine there. Now the second thing is we put a separate set of those, same type light, that 4-inch flood, and we mounted those up using a little piece of angle that we made out of just a simple piece of aluminum angle, make a bracket. We through bolted that. And then we used that same hole through system like we used to mount the interior lights. Only difference is we wanted to make sure that hole was super small so the wire just barely fit in there. And then we put just a dab of silicone around those to make sure that was kind of tightened up and nothing could get in or out of there. But those outside lights we angled out to the side. So many times when I'm loading up a machine, you're outside of the light beam, whether it's, you've got to have room, you can't park your machine right there, so you can get the door up, or just, loading and unloading things. Like I said, using this in the summertime for moving furniture or whatever it may be. And so those side lights really are nice for that, and having them so high and angled down, you get really good coverage. And then right down that center, path on the rear door itself, we've got a big light bar up there. And those are all tied in with a wiring harness. When you start getting high output LEDs like this, you really want to use the wiring harnesses, the relay harnesses, whatever you want to call them, that the manufacturers recommend, or you could definitely have a big problem and have a big draw on your batteries. And they really make it a lot easier, and they're not very expensive. And because these pull so much more power, we wanted to put another battery in, not only to isolate that, but to give us that much more juice without having to have more weight on the wall in one spot. So we put that Dakota lithium battery, a second one, in the rear of the trailer, close to where those lights are at, and that also allowed us to use a lot less wiring there, because again, we'd have to use some pretty decent sized wire in the wiring harness that could cause some problems there. So it made it a lot easier to get that all right there, make sure that that's fused in with that harness, and now we've got 2 different type of rear light setups on the trailer. Now another thing that I've learned is again, when you have that, let's say the trailer's locked up, you're in the parking lot, you got your machine, you're coming back or loading your washer up, whatever it may be, we wanted to put a switch on the outside. And so I found a really nice kind of waterproof outside switch, basically cover. And that allowed me to drill through, put a waterproof switch on, but now we've got this little door that goes on, and it's nice and high up in the trailer, and we just drilled and tapped that on, used a little bit of silicone. They do have a little kind of a foam piece in there that helps keep that water and keep things secure too. We took the extra step and we siliconed outside the outer edge of that as well. But that switch on the outside allows me to not have to be in the trailer to get at that lights, whether it's before or after. And that's a big upgrade off of my original trailer. So much so that I actually went back and put that switch in one of my other trailers there, because I realized that was a big snafu on my part.
Hopefully you guys enjoyed this part with putting the lights in the trailer build project. Next up, we have something kind of a little different there where you need the lights. Maybe you don't need this, but I definitely think once you watch this with the solar panels, that's the next section that's up and what we did basically to help with the lights. So make sure you check out this upcoming video, solar panels on the project trailer.